The highway stretched like a dark ribbon under the storm. Headlights cut through the rain, but the world beyond the glass felt distant, blurred, like a dream that had already ended. The wipers beat in slow rhythm, keeping time with the ache in her chest. They'd fought again, not loud, not cruel, just tired. The kind of argument where both sides run out of words but not resentment. He stayed home, she left. Said she needed to clear her head. Maybe she just needed to feel something again. The gas light blinked on. Of course it did. For miles, there was nothing but wet asphalt and the hum of the engine. Then, in the distance, a flicker of light. A gas station. One of those old ones that look half abandoned, surrounded by emptiness and fog. She pulled in, tires splashing through puddles, rain drumming on the hood. The place looked deserted, until the door creaked open and a man stepped out, holding a flashlight. He wasn't what she expected. Maybe a few years older. Broad shoulders under a soaked flannel. A steady calm in his voice when he spoke. Rough night? She gave a tired smile. You could say that. Looks like you need more than gas. He said it lightly, with a grin that almost made her forget the storm. He took the pump, his hand steady, rain sliding off his sleeves. She stood under the flickering light, watching him, trying not to think about how his silence felt kinder than all the words she'd left behind at home. When the thunder cracked again, she flinched. He looked up, met her eyes, really looked. The kind of look that doesn't rush, that doesn't ask for anything, just sees. You should come inside, he said quietly. Power's out. But I've got coffee on a generator. She hesitated. The rain poured harder. Lightning flashed across the empty fields. Okay, she whispered. He held the door open for her. The room was small, warm, smelling of fuel and instant coffee. He handed her a cup, their fingers brushing, small, harmless, but it lingered too long. Outside, the wind howled, but inside there was only the sound of their breathing, the low hum of the generator, and the faint drip of rain off his jacket. She didn't know what this was or why it felt safer than home. She only knew she wasn't ready to leave. When he smiled again, something inside her, quiet for too long, finally exhaled. The wind was howling when the lights flickered again. She sat in the small station office, hands wrapped around the mug he'd given her, watching drops of rain chase each other down the dusty window. The air smelled like coffee, diesel, and something faintly metallic, the scent of storms and loneliness. He was fixing the power line outside, the glow of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Every few seconds, thunder rolled, shaking the roof. She should have been afraid, but instead, she felt calm, anchored by the sound of his voice when he'd said, "You're safe here." When he came back inside, rain glistened in his hair, the collar of his shirt clinging to his neck. He smiled when he saw her still there. "Didn't think you'd wait," he said softly. "I didn't plan to," she replied. He poured another cup of coffee, his fingers brushing hers again. This time, neither of them pretended not to notice. "It's a long way to anywhere," he said, sitting across from her. "Yeah. I guess that's why I stopped." They talked about nothing, the road, the storm, how empty the night felt. But beneath every word was a silence that said everything they didn't. When thunder cracked again, she flinched. He reached across the table, steadying her hand. His palm was warm, rough. The gesture lingered, too long to be accidental, too gentle to be ignored. The power surged back on with a low hum. The lights blinked, flooding the room in pale yellow. She looked at him, really looked, and something inside her shifted. The walls felt too small, the air too thick. He didn't move closer, but his eyes asked a question she didn't need to hear out loud. She stood first. Not to leave, just to breathe. But when he followed her to the door, the space between them vanished. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper. The air shimmered, heavy and electric. He reached up, brushed a drop of water from her cheek, a simple gesture that wasn't simple at all. And when their lips met, it didn't feel like a decision. It felt like gravity. the rain finally slowed to a drizzle. She stood near the door, her back against the cold glass, watching the reflection of the neon sign flicker on the wet pavement outside. The hum of the generator filled the silence like a heartbeat. He was sitting a few steps away, elbows resting on his knees, his gaze fixed on the storm beyond the window. The air between them was thick, charged, heavy, wordless. Every time she looked at him, she felt that quiet gravity again. "You should stay until it clears," he said softly. "Roads get dangerous when they flood." She hesitated. "I don't want to intrude." "You're not," he answered, and his voice carried something that wasn't about safety at all. She turned toward the window again, but his reflection stayed behind her, close, patient. Lightning flashed, briefly lighting the room, and in that second, she saw his eyes, tired, searching, gentle. He stood and stepped closer. Not fast, not abrupt, just near enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath against her temple. "You look cold," he said quietly. "I'm fine." He smiled faintly. "You don't look fine." When he reached for her hand, she didn't stop him. His fingers were rough and warm, tracing the outline of hers, slow enough to ask a question. She didn't answer with words, just a breath, shallow and trembling. The thunder rolled again, distant now. He leaned closer, his forehead brushing hers, just a fraction of a moment before their lips met, hesitant at first, then certain. The world outside disappeared. There was no storm, no road, no clock. Just the soft rhythm of rain against the roof and the press of his hand against the small of her back, drawing her closer. When the lights flickered again, neither of them noticed. The only sound left was the low hum of the generator and the kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, it means surrender. And somewhere between the thunder and the quiet, she stopped pretending she wanted to leave. The storm outside had faded into a soft drizzle, but inside, the world still felt charged, heavy with something she couldn't name. The air was warm, humming with quiet electricity. The hum of the old generator was the only sound left, a slow, steady rhythm beneath their breathing. He stood beside her now, both of them facing the window, the rain tracing thin silver lines down the glass. Neither spoke for a long time. Words felt useless, they would only break what was already fragile. "I should go," she said at last, her voice quiet but unsure. "You don't have to," he replied, and the way he said it didn't sound like a request. She turned, and for a moment, the space between them was nothing, only warmth, coffee, and thunder still echoing somewhere in the distance. His hand brushed her arm, slow, deliberate. Her pulse stuttered. She didn't move. He looked at her like he was memorizing a moment, not asking, not pushing, just waiting. She took a breath that felt too loud in the silence. "This doesn't mean anything," she whispered. He smiled softly. "Then why does it feel like it does?" The next second happened without thought. His lips found hers, gentle first, then deeper, slower, real. The kind of kiss that feels like confession. Her hand rose instinctively to his neck, fingers tangling in his damp hair. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping faster against the window, drowning out the rest of the world. When they finally pulled apart, her breath trembled against his. Neither spoke. His hand lingered at her waist, her heartbeat still wild beneath his touch. Outside, the storm returned, wind bending the trees, thunder chasing itself across the sky. But inside, the warmth grew. The coffee grew cold. And when the lights flickered again, they didn't move away. Not yet. The kiss had left the air trembling. She felt it everywhere, the warmth on her lips, the pulse in her throat, the faint trace of his breath still caught in hers. Outside, thunder grumbled again, but it sounded far away, like another life. He took a step back, just enough to search her face. "You can still go," he said quietly. She shook her head before she could think. "I don't want to." That was all it took. He reached for her hand, and she followed him toward the back room, a narrow hallway lined with tools and half-empty shelves. The only light came from the storm outside, flashing across their faces in short, stolen moments. Every shadow felt alive. every heartbeat too loud. He stopped near the counter, turned, and for a moment they just stood there, two strangers breathing the same air, too close to pretend anymore. His fingers brushed the rain from her hair, then traced along her jaw, slow enough that her eyes fluttered shut. When he kissed her again, there was no hesitation. Her hands found his shoulders, then his chest, and the distance between them vanished completely. The generator hummed, the storm whispered, and the world beyond those thin walls simply ceased to exist. Time slipped. The rain softened, the thunder faded, but inside, it was still storming, quiet, relentless, unstoppable. When it was over, they didn't speak. They just sat there for a while, side by side on the edge of the counter, sharing the same breath. The air smelled of rain, coffee, and something new, something dangerous and unspoken. He finally broke the silence. "It's almost morning," he said, voice low. "You should get back on the road." She looked at him, her fingers still resting against his arm. "I know." But she didn't move. Not yet. Because some storms don't end when the rain does. Dawn came quietly, gray, fragile, hesitant. The storm had passed, but its scent lingered in the air, sweet and metallic. She sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, fingers wrapped around the steering wheel, eyes unfocused on the horizon. The gas station was silent behind her, a small light in the distance, still blinking faintly against the pale sky. For a second, she thought about walking back, maybe to say goodbye, maybe to make it mean less by pretending it didn't. But she didn't. Her hair was still damp, her skin still warm from where his hands had been. Every sound outside, the hum of power lines, the buzz of early crickets, seemed too clear, too sharp, as if the world was trying to remind her that it hadn't stopped spinning. She exhaled slowly, started the engine. The radio crackled, then caught a song she didn't recognize. A man's voice, low and soft, singing about roads and mistakes and things left behind. She turned it down. In the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of him, standing by the pumps, a cup of coffee in his hand, watching her. He didn't wave. Neither did she. The tire splashed through the puddles as she pulled onto the road. The sound was small, but it echoed like a goodbye. For a while, she drove without thinking. The world was washed clean, the sky faint blue. Everything should have felt lighter, but inside her chest was that quiet weight, the kind that doesn't crush you, just stays. She touched her lips once, as if to see if the night was still real. It was. When the first sign for the highway appeared, she rolled down the window. The wind rushed in, cool and fast, and for a moment she let it take everything, the smell, the heat, the memory. But even then, she knew it wouldn't. Because some nights don't fade with distance. They stay, soft as thunder, quiet as breath. Waiting in the silence between miles. By the time she reached the city, the sun had already risen high, bright, blinding, almost cruel in how normal everything looked. The traffic lights blinked green, the radio played cheerful songs, and people crossed the streets like nothing extraordinary had happened overnight. But inside her car, the world was still quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ribs, reminding you that you left a piece of yourself somewhere you can't go back to. She stopped for coffee at a roadside cafe, her hand still trembling when she passed the money to the cashier. The woman smiled politely, asked if she wanted sugar. She shook her head, unable to remember how she used to drink it. When she got home, Daniel's car was already in the driveway. The house looked just as she'd left it, blinds half open, his jacket hanging by the door, 2 mugs on the counter from the morning before their fight. Her heart picked up speed. She didn't have a lie ready. Didn't have anything ready. He was sitting on the couch, laptop open, papers scattered. When he looked up, his smile was small but real. "Hey," he said. "You're back." It shouldn't have sounded so normal. "I needed to drive," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. He nodded. "I figured. I'm sorry about last night. I shouldn't have said what I said." She froze, then exhaled. "It's okay. You were right." He closed the laptop and stood, walking over to her. The smell of his cologne hit her first, familiar, steady, predictable. He placed his hand on her shoulder, the way he always did when they made peace after an argument. "Come here," he whispered, pulling her gently into his arms. She let him. Her cheek pressed against his chest, and for a moment she tried to lose herself in the rhythm of his heartbeat, steady, slow, safe. But another heartbeat lived in her memory now. Faster. Rougher. Real. Daniel kissed the top of her head. "You smell like rain," he said softly. She forced a laugh. "It was pouring most of the night." "Guess it followed you home," he smiled, stepping back. She smiled too, but inside, the truth tightened like a knot. That night, when he fell asleep beside her, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs sounded like the old generator at the station, constant, low, familiar in the wrong way. She closed her eyes and saw it again, the flash of lightning on his skin, the way his breath trembled when he said you can still go, and how she didn't. Outside, another storm was gathering somewhere far away, invisible but real, moving slowly toward her life. And as Daniel's hand rested gently on her waist, she realized something she couldn't unthink. The silence she'd brought home wasn't empty. It was full of him. The next morning came with sun, sharp and golden, as if the world wanted to prove that nothing had happened. The sky was clean, the air smelled like new beginnings, but inside, everything was heavy, drenched in what she couldn't wash off. Daniel was in the kitchen, humming. He'd made breakfast, toast, eggs, the kind of quiet gesture he used to do when things were good. He looked up and smiled. "Morning, sleepyhead. Feel better?" She nodded, forcing a faint grin. "Yeah. I guess the drive helped." "Good," he said, flipping a pancake. "You needed it." He meant it kindly, but the words landed wrong. You needed it. She did. Just not the way he thought. He kissed her cheek, and she tried not to flinch. His lips were warm, familiar, gentle, everything they should have been. But they didn't reach her the way they used to. As he talked about work and errands and weekend plans, she nodded, smiled, played along. But her mind was still miles away, parked under a flickering neon sign at a gas station that probably didn't even look the same in daylight. When he left for work, she sat alone at the table, her coffee untouched. The smell of rain still lived in her jacket. Her fingers traced the rim of the cup the way they'd once traced his jaw. She told herself it was over, just a night, just a mistake. People make them. People move on. But then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Did you get home safe?" Her heart froze. The message was simple, but her body reacted like it had heard her name whispered in the dark. She stared at it for a long time before typing back. "Yes. Thank you." Then she deleted the conversation. She tried to read, to clean, to distract herself, but the silence pressed in harder. Every corner of the house looked too neat, too still. Every reflection in the mirror felt unfamiliar. By afternoon, the clouds started gathering again. Dark, slow, inevitable. She stood by the window, watching the sky change, hearing the first drops tap against the glass. It was ridiculous, she thought. A storm, again. But this time, she knew it wasn't the weather that unsettled her. It was memory. The feel of rain on her skin, the hum of that generator, his voice low against her ear saying, "You're safe here." She touched the windowpane, her reflection blurring in the fogged glass. The storm outside would pass. The one inside her wouldn't. Days turned into fragments, coffee gone cold, words half-heard, silences that grew too long. Life kept moving, as if nothing had cracked beneath the surface, but she could feel it, the small fracture inside her, spreading quietly, invisibly. Daniel was busy again. Work trips, calls, dinners that stretched late into the night. She should have felt relieved, more space to breathe, more distance between guilt and routine. But the quiet only made it worse. One evening, as she scrolled through her phone out of habit, her finger paused. That message. Did you get home safe? She had deleted it, but there it was, the words still in her mind, as vivid as if they'd just appeared again. Her chest tightened. She opened her contacts, hovered over unknown, and almost laughed at herself for even thinking about it. Then, before she could stop, she typed. The storm found me again. She didn't hit send. Not yet. But the thought of it pulsed like static in her hand. The house creaked with evening wind. Somewhere upstairs, Daniel was on another call, his voice calm, professional, distant. The same tone he used with everyone, except her, lately. The sound of rain began again, soft, hesitant. She stood by the kitchen window, watching droplets race down the glass, and for a second, she was back there, the smell of coffee, the hum of the generator, his hand steady against her trembling skin. The phone vibrated in her hand. A new message. Unknown number. I keep thinking about the rain. Her breath caught. The world narrowed. She stared at the screen, the letters glowing faintly in the dark kitchen. Then, she typed back. Me too. No goodbye. No explanation. Just that. The 3 dots blinked for a moment, then disappeared. No reply came. But she didn't need one. Because now she knew, he hadn't forgotten. And neither had she. She locked the screen, pressed the phone to her chest, and stood there in the half-dark, the sound of rain growing heavier. The night outside was just weather. But the storm inside her, that was memory refusing to fade. 2 weeks passed before she saw it again, that same stretch of highway, the one that led nowhere but still felt like escape. Daniel was out of town on business, and the silence of the house was unbearable. Every clock tick sounded like accusation. Every empty chair reminded her what she'd done, and what she still wanted to feel. By sunset, she was driving. No plan, no music, just the hum of the tires and the slow bleed of light fading into dusk. The road curved through empty fields, the sky bruised with the last traces of orange. She told herself she just needed air. Distance. Nothing more. But when the first familiar neon glow appeared in the distance, that faint red light blinking against the horizon, her heart began to pound. The gas station. Still there. Still waiting. She slowed the car, pulled in. The place looked smaller now, quieter. One light in the office window, one pump still working. He was there. Standing beside the door, sleeves rolled up, the same calm steadiness in his posture, but when he saw her, his face changed. A flicker of surprise. Then something softer. I didn't think I'd see you again, he said. Neither did I, she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment, they just stood there, 2 people pretending to be strangers again, both knowing they weren't. He nodded toward the car. Need gas? She shook her head. No. I just ended up here. His lips curved slightly. No one ends up here by accident. The words hung between them, heavy and true. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar under his eye, the small stain of oil on his wrist. She remembered both from that night, like details from a dream she'd been trying not to wake from. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. I know. But you are. The rain started again, light, uncertain. He reached past her to close the office door, and she caught the scent of him, coffee, smoke, and rain. Her pulse quickened. When their eyes met again, everything she'd tried to bury came rushing back, the storm, the warmth, the quiet surrender. He looked at her for a long time, his voice barely a breath when he spoke. You came back because you didn't want it to end there, did you? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because when he reached out, slow, careful, she didn't move away. And somewhere in that small, forgotten place on the map, with rain against the roof and nothing else in the world but the sound of their breathing, she knew she hadn't come for closure. She'd come because the silence at home had become louder than guilt. She didn't go back to the gas station again. She told herself one return was enough, that whatever existed between them had already burned itself out in that brief, impossible space between two storms. But wanting to forget and knowing how to were different things. At night, she'd lie beside Daniel, his steady breathing filling the dark. She tried to match her rhythm to his, tried to feel grounded by the warmth of their shared bed. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw that lonely highway, the rain glittering under headlights, and the man who'd made her feel seen for the first time in years. It wasn't love, at least, that's what she told herself. It was a moment. A single, dangerous moment that had given her something her marriage had quietly lost, presence. Weeks passed. The guilt dulled, but it didn't fade. It became part of her, like a scar under clothing, hidden, but always there. Then one evening, Daniel found her sitting outside on the porch, staring at the sky as another storm gathered in the distance. He handed her a blanket, sat down beside her, and for a while, they just listened to the wind. "You've been quiet lately," he said softly. "Just tired," she answered. He nodded, then looked at her, really looked, maybe for the first time in months. "You sure there's nothing else?" The question hung in the air, heavy as thunder. She turned toward him, forcing a smile. "No. Nothing." He studied her face for a moment longer, then looked away. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" Her throat tightened. "Yeah. I know." But she couldn't. Not this. Not the thing that had changed her in a way even she didn't fully understand. The first drops of rain began to fall, slow and soft. Daniel reached for her hand, his fingers warm and familiar. She let him take it. But even as the storm rolled in and the thunder drowned their silence, she couldn't shake the thought that somewhere out there, another storm was breaking over that same gas station. And maybe, just maybe, he was standing under it too. Wondering if she ever thought about the rain. It rained again that night, not a storm this time, just a soft, endless drizzle. She stood at the window, watching the water slide down the glass, tracing paths that vanished as quickly as they formed. It had been almost a month since she last saw him. Since that second storm. Since she told herself it was over. Daniel came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "You're up late," he murmured. "Couldn't sleep. Still thinking about work?" She nodded, though that wasn't it. He kissed her shoulder and stayed there, silent. For a moment, she almost believed the rhythm of his breathing could drown out the echo of another heartbeat, one that didn't belong here anymore. But even as Daniel whispered, "Let's take a trip soon." Just us, she saw it, that empty gas station, the red light blinking in the dark, the way the air had smelled of rain and heat and something dangerous. When he fell asleep, she sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through old photos, messages, nothing in particular. Then, almost without thinking, she opened her Maps app. The route to that highway still sat in her search history. Just a line of gray, faint but still there. Her thumb hovered over clear recent locations. Then stopped. She stared at it for a long time before finally turning off the phone and setting it face down. In the morning, Daniel would make coffee, kiss her cheek, talk about their plans, their future. And she would smile, genuinely, maybe, because some parts of her still belonged here. But not all of them. Because there are places that stay with you, not for what you did there, but for who you were when the world finally went quiet. And somewhere, on a forgotten stretch of road, a single neon light still hummed in the dark. Waiting for the sound of an engine slowing down again.